my god, oh my god.
Radio Free Innsmouth, episode 173.
Hey, my name is George Bloodstrom, and right now, I'm gonna talk to you about black metal.
Ever heard of it?
I've heard of it.
Specifically, we are going to be talking about the French black metal band Maléfice, who are very much of the persuasion. Now, I know what you're thinking.
우리 동아리 실세는 바로
Whenever somebody plays me one of these natsock black metal bands, they either end up sounding like this, you know, all raw and clearly influenced by Burzum and Dark Throne, just kind of nasty sounding shit, or else they're like kind of groovy and punky, heavily influenced by RAC bands. Well, these guys are different. How are they different?
You might ask.
Well, they play symphonic black metal. In fact, a couple weeks ago at the end of the final Summoning episode, I said that Summoning was kind of a tricky band to be influenced by, because pretty much every band that you can clearly point out as being influenced by Summoning sound exactly like Summoning. It's true, you know, Caladan, Brood, Emin, Mawil, Kinstrife, and Blood. I love them all, but they just sound like Summoning clones. Well, I'm gonna have to
Eat a bowl of fuck!
on that, because while Maléfice's influence from Summoning is clearly evident in the music, they don't really sound like a Summoning clone all that much. So if you're like one of these super wacky Nazi bands that really takes that shit seriously, how the hell are you gonna play that kind of black metal while still, you know, fitting in with the rest of that scene? Well, you're gonna have to do a little bit of the old Vril posting with the Haunabu saucers and the Tibetan expeditions and the secret Antarctic bases and the Evolan Buddhism shit, you know what I mean? Now, these guys weren't the first, like, explicitly NS symphonic black metal band. There's been a couple of them. The most notable one is probably Kataxu from Poland. If I mispronounce the band name, you can,
blow it out your ass.
so many wacky fucking squiggly marks and accents in that language. For my blood, I tell you what. But yeah, you can tell these guys, Kataxu, they were big on Emperor, and they kind of did their own thing with it. There's only 2 Kataxu albums, unfortunately, but they were very good. So it is not unprecedented to do a heavily symphonic, big, like, keyboard soundy, very clean sounding black metal album about wacky right-wing occult shit. But whereas Kataxu kind of worked with the Emperor template, Maléfice worked with the Summoning template. And that actually goes down to having early material that not too many people listened to that was much more kind of normal black metal sounding. Well, as normal as Maléfice gets. Maléfice is always usually on like the weirder side of black metal, which is probably why, even though I've only recently gotten into them, I enjoy them a lot. But yeah, Joachim Pantus, the main guy behind the band, it's a one-man band at this point, and he decided to let all the instruments breathe on that initial recording in 1999, which means you get cool bass stuff like that, like those weird little fills and shit. But most of this album is, you know, it's a little bit more normal sounding, kind of melodic black metal. It's not that fucking weird, which is why, even though this EP was released in 2017, he says he recorded it in 1999, and I believe him, because it sounds like 1999 black metal, albeit a bit stranger with some of the production choices and occasional bits of orchestral flair. But like with Summoning, that's just sort of the prologue for everything, you know, that's the more normal sounding black metal stuff out of the way, and there's nowhere near as much of it with Maléfice compared to Summoning, who did like a whole album of that. And there's not like a massive online contingent of dorks
안 골라 이건 포기 패스.
dedicated to hating on their early material for no reason like there is with Summoning. In fact, there's not really a massive online contingent of anything related to Maléfice. I couldn't find too much info about this band, like, at all, which is why this episode took a while to make. I had to do a lot of my own, like, original research, you know? It's not going to be accepted on Wikipedia. But getting into what I would probably term Maléfice proper, you know, the current day Maléfice sound that is present on all 3 of their full-length albums, as opposed to the demo EP he recorded way back when as a solo project. You can hear the Summoning influence in the way that he's done the drums on this. Very much similar to the kind of tribal, super echoey, multi-layered drum machine work you'd hear on Oathbound. The keys, however, are much more kind of like astral and ethereal sounding, which seems to be a commonplace thing in the more NS-oriented symphonic black metal thing. But the important stuff I want to talk about here is the guitars, because they are very thick and very chunky, and I've heard this kind of technique being used by summoning on quite a few of the songs on Stronghold and Let Mortal Heroes Sing Your Fame, but not in such a martial manner.
아, 이거는 못 고르지.
What's that weird kind of squeaky, clangy noise? To explain that, whoa! It's worth going back to 1992, Sweden, the first Cemetery album. You see that same kind of weird squeaky noises there? That's actually the sound of the guitar pick striking the string. It happens when you have a really sharp guitar tone that's also really thick, and usually it's seen as a bit of a mistake by the record producer. But in Maléfice's case, it's not a mistake, and I think they're actually using it very inventively, what would normally be seen as a screw up by the producer, to turn the guitars almost into a percussion instrument for this part. Very interesting. So it's summoning influence, but they're using very different synth patches, and they have a very different atmosphere. Very like regal sounding and pompous, which fits the theme of the music. Also, the bass is quite a bit more important in Maléfice than it is in summoning, thereby further distinguishing them from their forebears. That's a very nice melodic black metal riff, so you can see how like that sort of like fast blasty style they were utilizing on that debut demo is still with them. They're just doing much more regal and kind of summoning sounding shit with it. A lot of Maléfice's sound comes from the fact that they take things that would be like seen as weird and maybe like strange bad choices production wise or songwriting wise. They take those and they do interesting things with them on purpose, which is why I find them to be a fascinating band. For instance, listeners might be aware of the last Emperor album, Prometheus, that kind of did a lot of this stuff with like weird chuggy guitars and then a very like melodic kind of clean guitar playing over the top of it. Interesting stuff.
That was close. I was about to get pregnant.
Later on, Gotyna Kreh from Poland, who actually featured the vocalist from Kataksu, ended up utilizing similar techniques to that which Emperor used, but these guys were like an NS band. I don't know if that affected how they utilize that technique at all, but it seems a little bit more organized and pleasant sounding than it did on the Emperor album. Similarly, Maléfice decided to muck around with that concept a bit, taking something that was maybe a bit too chaotic and strange for most people and doing their own thing with it. Another thing they may have taken from Prometheus was these like very obviously electronic synthesized sounding kind of noises. That weird sort of like dancey gurgling shit going on in the background. Definitely wouldn't hear that on a summoning album. But yeah, here's them utilizing that guitar technique. But you can see it's a lot more organized and like pleasant sounding, nowhere near as dissonant. And I think that comes down to the fact that they are an NS band and they take a lot of influence from like Germanic classical music. So everything is very like thoroughly well thought out, almost in kind of like a Mozart sort of way. And I, for one, am grateful for it because it fits their concept very well and it makes for some excellent music. Plus, who doesn't hate nice guitar solos? Good stuff. I left this part in here just because I like this synth patch. I thought it was cool. I don't know. Doesn't really have any bearing on any of the arguments I've been making. It just sounds neat. And that's why I like Maléfice. They do a lot of stuff that just sounds neat, even if it is a bit strange. Here's more of that kind of like percussive sort of summoning style guitar work coming back, coupled with that horn, very majestic sounding. I like that a lot. You might have noticed how that sounded a bit different from the stuff I played from them earlier, specifically No More Drum Machine. They got a live drummer. In fact, the main guy that runs Maléfice for the most recent album ended up hiring like a full band, which further distances them from being like a standard summoning clone and heavily affected their sound. The newest Maléfice album, which I will not attempt to pronounce because I don't want to murder the French language the same way I apparently completely botch everything that's like Polish and Russian. But that new album has a full band behind it, and it's probably my favorite material from them by far. Very unique sounding. But he brought in musicians that were already established in other bands, and I believe that may have bled into the sound quite a bit. Specifically, the current drummer is actually also the current live drummer for Graveland, and the current bassist is the guy behind the Australian one-man black metal band Brahmastra, who sound like this. A much more standard sounding kind of NSBM type thing where there's a lot of obvious influence from RAC bands, quite a bit of hardcore in here. How groovy it is. It's got a very beefy guitar tone, which my theory is that this kind of stuff definitely influenced newer Maléfice. It also has similar lyrical concepts to Maléfice, which is probably why they get along. Although Brahmastra, maybe just because it's in English, it seems to be a bit more obvious and on the nose about that sort of thing. Still a cool band though, I like them. But yeah, my theory is that having people from other bands that were much more aggressive and nasty sounding, I can't prove that they influenced the songwriting process for newer Maléfice material, but if I sniff around, I can kind of get the scent that that might be what's going on. Just a theory though.
Welcome to Game Theory.
Speaking of being more aggressive, how about that nasty fucking bass line introducing the song here? That's good stuff, like that a lot. Also, this synth line right here, this is what got me to listen to Maléfice, because this is like the best thing ever. It's so cool. I mean, you know, you could try in front and say, oh, they're just playing scales. You know who else they said that about? Mozart. Ever heard of it? But yeah, no, I think that would be the Germanic classical influence from like their NS background. Also, check out this like dank counterpoint to that. And like the lead guitar they're doing, there's little battery melodic spikes. That's cool stuff. So yeah, like this point in their career, these dudes aren't even really like a summoning knockoff in any sense of the word. They've went from being the best summoning style band to being the best Maléfice style band. Like this utterly unique sound on this most recent Maléfice album. Big fan of all three of their albums, but I would say that's the one to get. But don't think they left behind like the spirit of their early material, because it's definitely fully incorporated into the sound of this newer album. For instance, the final song on their first album prominently features a classical ostinato of very dark and epic proportions. Like probably the darkest riff on the album. Really good, winding, tremolo-picked black metal riff with the clattering, summoning influenced drum machine in the background. Makes for a very epic close to the album. But would you believe that, speaking of Germanic classical music, they pulled a Wagner, did a bit of a leitmotif thing, and brought this melody back on the newest album in their new style. You can hear that melody kind of poking its way through the digital electronic morass and a fucking Hammond organ. That's pretty cool. There it is. There it is. The great riff is back. But yeah, I thought it was cool that they're bringing back riffs and like memorable moments from earlier albums and building on them by adding like that nice little kind of lead guitar thing they've been doing recently. Really beefing up the sound of that riff from a prior album and doing something completely different with it. That's what Maléfice is all about, man. Just doing completely different things. There's another like very nice sort of slow-paced battery take on that riff. Also, I really love this dude's vocals. He sounds a lot like Kinyas Vargot with Nocturnal Mortem back on their early albums. A very odd kind of weird raspiness, but also sort of like almost moist quality to the voice.
앞머리 안 자를 거예요.
What? It's metal. It's supposed to be kind of gross and nasty. I don't know. But that's Maléfice. One of my favorite recently discovered bands. Thanks to everybody in the comments that told me to listen to them because I like them a whole lot. I'll see you next week, probably with something fairly obnoxious.
Eddie, soldier, you've done your duty.
It's about saving the world, not changing it. Lots of people nowadays change the world. No, we're gonna save the world.